Alright guys, we're on with something a bit different today. I've decided to do a commentary on this psychedelic inspired game called Datura, obviously named after the plant that we all know and love. I've actually played this game before in the past, ages ago. It was one of the first games I think that was properly showing off the PlayStation Move controller, which was basically Sony's attempt to ape off the success of the Wii. Motion controls were all the rage back in the 7th generation of consoles. I think it's the 7th generation, the PS3, the 360 and the Wii. And obviously Microsoft and Sony were chasing Nintendo's success with the Wii. And there was a lot of hit and misses. But this game was quite an obscure hit. I think it's become, I wouldn't even say a cult classic because people don't even remember it. I mean, I only started thinking about it the other day when I was looking up psychedelic inspired games for this series I want to do. And it was interesting to rediscover it because there's so much in this game that we actually appreciate about games nowadays, say art games and quote unquote walking simulators. And I think it actually got fairly misaligned when it came out. A lot of people overlooked it due to the motion controls, which are a bit janky. I mean, so many games with motion controls were janky around then. But the meat of the game is actually quite interpretive, philosophical, and pretty surreal in a number of ways. And before you think that, oh, this is going to be some like Datura simulator, it actually isn't, but there's definitely some psychedelic influences to be found in the game. So basically it starts off with you in an ambulance, and one thing leads to another, and we actually end up in a forest, which becomes the foundation of the game. The exploration all stems from the forest, although we'll discuss that more once we actually get to the forest in game. Just as a side note, this actually isn't my footage. I was unable to find a ROM for the PS3 emulator, and even if I could find one, I don't have the hardware capable to record it at a good quality. And also it's just not on the PS Store at all, which is pretty sad. So this is another game that's been lost in time. It's pretty tragic, because obviously a lot of effort went into it.
Oh shit, we're in critical condition.
Yeah, so some bad shit starts to go down with our physical body, and the lovely doctor decides to inject us with some psycho, and then we're presented by this quote by Dante Alighieri, I think that's how you pronounce it, famously the poet who composed Dante's Divine Comedy, one of the most famous pieces of literature ever. That quote, basically what it means in the context of the Divine Comedy is that the dark woods symbolise sinful life on earth, and the straight road or the right road refers to the virtuous life that leads to God. And that's a pretty cool quote to use to contextualise the game. It also links in with Datura and the experiences that produces. I mean, so many people describe it as the most hellish experience of all time. It couldn't be further from God / consciousness if it tried. Nothing like any of the eye-opening, profound psychedelics such as 5-MeO or DMT, or even your classic ones like LSD. There are mystical experiences that have been reported with Datura, but for the most part, the plant is pretty fucked up. Oh, and there she is, the beauty. Oh, I wish the player went and looked at it. See, this is why I needed to have found a way to record it, because I wanted to do it in my own way. But the next game we cover, I'll do that. So yeah, it's pretty funky environment, and for the PS3, this was pretty mind blowing for me when I first played it. Like, if any of you are I'm not even that old. If you're as old as me, 23 coming on 24. You were playing the PS3 around 12 years old or so, 11 years. I mean, I think I first got it at 11 years old. This game actually didn't come out till 2012 though, so it was a few years after the initial launch of the console. It actually came out in early May of 2012. It came out on 9th of May in PAL regions. So obviously we can see here that
It's utilizing the PlayStation Move in a revolutionary way.
But yeah, it was pretty cool. I remember playing this. The Move was way more accurate than the Wii before they brought out the Wii Motion Plus. So playing games like these, pretty cool novelty. Although you can actually play it with the DualShock 3, which could often be more intuitive and less clunky. This is Immersion 101 right here. Games don't get more realistic than this. Those hand textures are actually quite good for 2012 PS3. It's a shame they don't re-release this game because it would look really good in 4K, upscaling it. It's mad, isn't it, back then when 720p was mind-blowing, wasn't it? That was the first HD resolution that most people had access to. And it was honestly mind-blowing going from the PS2 in the sub-HD resolutions, and seeing that was like, holy fuck. And then 1080p beyond that was like, holy shit, how does it get better? And then now today we have 8K. It's honestly unbelievable, the advancement of technology. Although I'm getting sidetracked. We're into like the meat of the game now, so this is it. You're exploring these funky, weird, surreal environments, and they actually change up as you go along. Datura-like experiences will happen where you'll open doors and they just lead to nowhere, and then inexplicable items and objects, animals and characters will appear that seemingly make no sense, but actually there is a deeper meaning to this game. And later on I'm actually going to read out an amazing article that I don't think many people will have ever stumbled across, even people who played this game. And it actually fully and accurately describes what's going on in the game, so much so that the actual developers, Plastic Studios, on their blog, they put it seems there was actually one person who discovered the actual meaning of the game. You can find the details in this article. And then, yeah, they made a little blog post on the PlayStation blog. And they said, "It's been a while since we launched Datura exclusively on PSN, and lately I've been wondering if anyone had deciphered the true meaning of the game. In many interviews with the press, I've said that Datura is open for interpretation and that it depicts visions of what happens after you die." Of course, hashtag your generic gamer is like, "I don't want to interpret a game, I want to play the game." And like, obviously, people's opinion towards art games and walking simulators back then, it was like, oh, cursed. And it wasn't until, say, Journey and games like that it opened people's minds to the idea that some games don't have to be dopamine-fueled, frenetic, action-packed blockbusters. They can be quiet, more thoughtful, experimental games such as Datura. And it's a shame that it didn't pick up well, because it actually got the best of reviews, this game. And yeah, it received mixed reviews according to Metacritic. IGN praised the atmospheric elements, criticised the shortness and the clumsiness of the gameplay. Although people really appreciated the inventiveness of it, GameSpot heavily criticised the shortness and the lack of clarity in the plot. Although, see, the lack of clarity, see, that was obviously an aspect of the design of the game that was intended. Although, again, when it's open to interpretation, it's easy to hate something if your interpretation of it is jack shit. Kotaku commended its originality, yet defined the overall experience of Datura as confusing, unsatisfying, and ultimately fleeting. And yet, whilst that may be true, at least there was more imagination going into this game than fucking whatever Call of Duty was coming out in 2012. Some shite. It's probably like, it's Black Ops, wasn't it? Oh, fuck that. Not that there's anything wrong with Call of Duty, it just is emblematic of the capitalist juggernaut that the games industry really is. Let's keep churning them out, holy shit. But games like these getting shelved, it is sad, and they're going to be lost in time. I mean, someday no one's going to be talking about this game ever, so that's why I wanted to talk about it again, because it's worth looking at, and obviously... And for psychonauts who appreciate art and enjoy playing a game, this is definitely worth it. So,
Sony, if you're listening to this, re-release the game. Please.
I mean, you could do so much with it. Let's bring out Datura 2. Datura 2 Fully Loaded Edition. The studio who developed this game, Plastic Studios, they've only really made 3 games, I believe. Obviously, they've made other stuff, but 3 big releases: Lingering Shadows from October 9th, 2008, Datura, and then Bound, which was released in August 16th, 2016, which was actually released to quite a few good reviews back in the day, I believe. And I think it's like some form of like dancing game. Oh yeah, Bound is a platform and art video game featuring a dancer as the main character. The game received mostly positive critical reviews, praising its art style and originality, but criticising the gameplay as shallow. Oh, poor Plastic Studios. They really pour their hearts into these games and people just shun them. Although, what do you expect from gamers? I mean, I would have gotten bored with some of these games if I wasn't in the right mindset. I'll have to check out that Bound. It also looks quite trippy, surreal, and any sort of art game is naturally going to be interesting to a psychonaut. I mean, psychonauts love art. It's a concentration of higher levels of consciousness in the material form that we can indulge in and feel a connection to our higher self. And that's really what's so amazing about art, is connecting you to your higher self, which is infinite consciousness. And less of the metaphysical. Let's get back to the meat of it. Get back to the game. So this pig keeps showing up. This was iconic in the marketing. It's actually on the cover of the game as well, and we'll be seeing him for quite a bit through the game, I believe. You can interact with stuff by throwing it with the hand. Obviously, this was fucking revolutionary at the time. Now we take it for granted. I mean, there's not a lot of motion controls in games anymore. I know that VR's sort of taken over and that's incorporating into it, and it's actually a good idea because motion controls by itself, they're just lacking something. I mean, this game, again, if it was re-released, Datura Fully Loaded Edition, you could get the VR on the go, you could get both PlayStation Move controllers, the 3D audio. It'd be amazing. You could do so much with that, and that's what's lacking in VR. I played a lot of VR games and they are so gimmicky. I mean, people thought this game was gimmicky back in the day. Have you played fucking some of the free VR games that they give to you? Some of them are terrible. I've only played PSVR, unfortunately, which is such a dumbed down, quote unquote, version of actual VR, say the HTC Vive, which I'm yet to play. I hear that's much smoother. Right, so we're following our lad pig into this ominous looking tunnel, and we're gonna see what freaky shit's on the other side. Although not before we check if stereo 3D mode is available, and unfortunately it's not available. Serious Datura vibes on that. Like I said before, inexplicable things can happen in the game. Very dreamlike. 1 minute you're somewhere, next minute you're somewhere else, and the elements of like realistic foundation to it, but actually it's all just completely surreal and esoteric. Pretty cool. And let's just say the soundtrack in this game is actually great. So much so that it was actually a hit with players, and they released it for free on the PS Store at the time. It's really, really good. I suggest looking it up and downloading it yourself. Perfect, trippy vibes. My guy is having a hard time driving this car with the revolutionary PlayStation Move controller.
Only on PlayStation.
Just reading the dev notes here, and the first one, from 15th of October 2011, titled Datura First Teasers. Heh, we made some little noise with our new baby. We would like to show you first teasers of Datura. It's the new big thing we were making with Sony Santa Monica Studio. Oh, big name there. It started almost 2.5 years ago, and silently we were working until today. As people from various sites have discovered, the project is called Datura. We were working hard to bring you a much more immersive experience by using PlayStation Move controller as well as 3D stereography. This is as much as we can say for today. We will keep you updated. Meanwhile, try to find remaining teasers. Fair play for them working on it for that long. Obviously, they had a vision, they stuck to it, and they wanted to use some radical new technology to achieve that. You've got to commend them, no matter whether you find the game fun or not. I wonder if this guy found the game fun or not. Funnily enough, the person who uploaded the no commentary walkthrough, Tough Gaming Guy, big up my man, he actually put in the description of the video, "This has to be one of the weirdest games I have ever played. I don't know what to think of it. Was it good? No. Was it bad? No. I have no idea what I was doing. The controls were also kinda confusing. Seemed to me like the protagonist had PTSD or mad depression." Yeah, I guess you could say that. Here's some more premium interactivity right here. Oh, this guy's actually playing with the DualShock 3. Well, yeah, well, of course it is. There was literally button prompts before. I don't know, I didn't notice that. Hope my commentary isn't too sloppy or unprofessional. Well, I know it's unprofessional. It's supposed to be a casual commentary. But if you'd like me to amp it up a bit more in the next few editions of this series, I know I have trouble speaking sometimes. I can do that. I'm way more articulate if I'm writing down what I need to say. So yeah, chuck us some feedback if this commentary style is annoying, because we have the technology, it can be fixed if needs be. And get a load of this shit. This is giving Killzone 3 a run for its money. One of, if not the greatest shooting segments in any game, if I do say so myself. This is a pretty interesting mechanic where you can discover these white trees and you can place your palm on them to work out your location, and it helps you map out the area in the notebook. Although it can be quite underwhelming because the areas are pretty small, so you don't really need the map. Although trophy hunters out there will appreciate it. Never really been a trophy hunter, but I do like to complete a game. Platinum it is a complete other story. That I've not platinumed many games. That's some serious dedication if you do that. Although some of them are a walk in the park. But this one will be a walk in the park. I mean, the game's only an hour long or so, really. If you breeze through it, you could 100% it very easily. Looks like we've been arrested for selling Datura seeds at the local playground. Fucked it. This is definitely where the game starts to get more interesting. the novelty of walking around the forest can get a bit tedious after a bit. The real highlights are these strange out of the blue sequences where literally anything could happen. You're constantly on your toes in this game because, much like with Datura, the unpredictability is the appeal in some sense. Man, I would never do Datura ever, unless I was absolutely guaranteed that my safety would be confirmed. Otherwise, I literally could not do it. It not only is it toxic to the body, it just doesn't sound physically comfortable in any way. Although inside of us, like many psychonauts such as myself, there is always that curiosity regarding the unknown and crazy dreamlike hallucinations. That is fascinating. Like, I can see why people would want to experience that, because holy shit, I mean, imagine actually experiencing a lucid dream but within the relative domain, rather than a dream you've had when you've gone to sleep. Although, are we not all truly asleep? My guy's been fly tipping. Maybe that's what he got arrested for. Scandalous behaviour. I love how frantically he's trying to pick up that. This is the most 2012 thing I've ever seen. Listen to that music in the background. That is some serious attention to detail. Such a great soundtrack. That's going to be the first thing I get on next time I trip. Get the Datura soundtrack on. It's just so perfect. The developers must have taken psychedelics or been interested in psychedelics. I wish there was more information to find regarding this. Maybe when they do Datura 2, I can offer them an interview. So here's another one of the admittedly overly simple puzzles. Very basic interaction going on with these, although it's quite immersive in some sense. And we're about to see some amazing liquid physics. This is gonna fucking blow your mind, swear down. That is some next level technology, to be fair. Blast processing, eat your heart out. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that pressing triangle at any time actually directs you towards your next goal. So if you are struggling to find your way around the admittedly small levels, there is an option to help you out, which is really quite kind. So yeah, we're pouring the fucking slurm into my lassie's bowl or pot, and now she's presented as a bowl with a key. Whether he chooses to ingest some ketamine with said key is another question.
Isn't this a jolly good record?
Damn right, this is an absolute banger, mate. Master Hand's about to embody my man Gordon Freeman. This bit right here gives me serious Silent Hill 4 The Room vibes. If anyone's ever played that game, and well, it's slightly underrated. There's a lot of parts of that game that's shit, but the segments in the room were so memorable, and looking through the peephole and observing everyone was so twisted and fucked up in some scenarios. Mate, physics for right there. This is the first person we actually have discovered in the forest. Obviously, everything else before this has been an illusion. I guess we could assume that the player character has actually consumed Datura and is on some fucking freaky mind-bending trip. Well, at least that's what I assumed at first when I played it. So now that you've seen the bulk of the gameplay, I actually wanted to read out this article that I mentioned before that the developers featured on their blog, saying that someone had actually hit the nail on the head in terms of an analysis of this game, and it's by a user on Tumblr called Postplay. I'll link it in the description for you. Really, really well presented, this Tumblr blog. Man, I've not used Tumblr since I was like 12. Such a weird site back in the day. You forget about shit like that. Kids today, they don't even know how fucked up Tumblr was. So I'm going to read you this. It's called The Forbidden Fruit, a brief interpretive study of plastics Datura. And I hope you enjoy it. If you don't, then feel free to skip to this point in the video, and we'll get back to commentary over the game. But this is going to be basically an extensive explanation and interpretation of the game, and the developers say it's up to snuff, so I hope you enjoy. Evading the severe commercial determinism that has shaped the games industry for the better part of its existence, the Demoscene Collective, another offspring of the digital age, has thrived during the last 3 decades despite being firmly rooted on purely non-commercial principles. Assuming the unorthodox identity of a technologic subculture with patent artistic concerns, its singular real-time audio-visual abstractions have supplied the leitmotif for numerous video game productions, some of which highly reputed on account of their purported originality and aesthetic grandeur. In recent years, an ever-expanding group of reformists has sought to reconcile the foundations of game design with the creative liberty that is unique to the computer arts milieu. One notable example of this struggle can be found in the seminal Real-Time Art Manifesto penned by Harvey and Samin in 2006. Two outsiders whose original works and theory advocate the liberation of interactivity from the confines of the game establishment. Founded and based in Poland, Plastic stands out as one among an elite of demo groups whose scrupulous contributions to the advancement of computer graphic technologies still beg for greater recognition. Their first PlayStation 3 project, Lingering Shadows, released shortly before Farbrausch's Detuned, was received with scant enthusiasm within a game community whose luminaries did little more than to praise its visual splendour. To those working in the same field, however, it was deemed a triumph not only on account of its elegant interactive attributes, yet also for the overall brilliance which merited the sponsorship from a major international enterprise. This liaison between the team led by I'm going to try my hardest to pronounce this, Michael Stanisławski, as was revealed of late, included another venture under the suggestive title Datura, comparatively more audacious an undertaking. Part of its technological challenges were outsourced to able hands. Because the demo scene's widely adopted method is customarily based on passive technologic sophistication, the understanding of this meaningful departure and its repercussions, in the quality of a fully interactive hybrid, entails a more tactful approach. In more ways than one, Datura summons a similar aesthetic to that of Plastic's previous demos, recovering a sequence of appealing components that render their work immediately recognisable before the discerning eye. In this virtual sphere, industrial and classical architecture clash against one another within the subjective mesh of spatial memories. The inert garden statuary weighs against the verve of insect swarms, into the pink, brackets, and gleeful animals, brackets, lingering shadows. Liquid materials are manifestly indivisible from thick globules, brackets, final audition. Distant objects, processed with the studio's signature median filter, continue to assume an impressionist, almost pointillist aspect. Contrariwise, the breadth of their latest creation far exceeds any of the studio's previous enterprises, as the organic forest and its many outlandish exits are built to withstand the closest scrutiny. The floating hand routine, bound to raise awareness within a consumer population misguided by the illusion of motion control accoutrements, soon reveals itself as a merely suggestive function with which to increase the immersiveness factor. The noble aspiration for some extent of technological achievement notwithstanding. Fundamentally, and as much as it allows itself to be mistaken for a video game proper, Datura pursues no conscious effort to honour the medium and its widespread formalities, and is therefore best interpreted as a broader statement, one only partially concerned with the fidelity of the technology it employs, as per the demo scene's golden rule. Additionally, it stands as a proclamation of alternative concerns from the designer's viewpoint, inclusive enough to be perverted, yet also to content those factions pleading for a more judicious of game content in interactive pieces. Oddly enough, and albeit the propitious literary and cultural references that sustain it, Datura evokes various examples from within the field of video games. Some are meant to be celebrated, where others are clearly vilified, not unlike citations in an analytical or comparative essay. Following moments of a darker humorous tone, the sporadic usage of firearms is easily identified as a witty satirization of the ubiquitous video game gunplay. On the other hand, when the screen locks on the sight of a red crowbar from a first-person perspective, it is possible to conclude, by no particular stretch of the imagination, that some degree of approbation of Valve's Half-Life series is being insinuated. Mate, I fucking called that before when he went for the crowbar, I'm smart me. Other elements, vague and less explicit, appear to summon the memory of the Miller brothers' Piece de Resistance, Tale of Tales Fatale, as well as Yamaoka's The Room. At the height of its The Room, I fucking called that before, even though it was a Silent Hill reference. At the height of its hypnagogic dementia, and as the assortment of unforeseeable and seemingly unrelated spaces is exposed, Datura goes as far as to inadvertently evoke the hazy remembrance of Sato's LSD Dream emulator. Whoa, it's all coming together now. I'm going to be covering that next on this series, so we'll have to see if there's any ties between them in terms of the gameplay, because I've never actually played that. I've only ever seen footage. Bountiful and inscrutable, the forest is a fundamental source of myth in most cultures throughout history. Commonly regarded as an autonomous organism, it not only exceeds man's grasp as it overrules his will and beliefs, the wilderness, in its sunless obscurity and unpredictable perils, is regulated by its independent deities. This pervasive image of the pathless woods is consonant with that of the modern psychological assessment of a primeval space, whose intricate connotation is still deeply engraved in contemporary thought, frequently referred to as a metaphor for the secluded domains of the psyche. Combining the arcane forms of medieval Christendom with the precepts of classical art and philosophy, Dante introduced the 9 circles of hell by alluding to woodland imagery as a symbol of the interruption of life and its normality, portraying it as a place where all entrants feel at once estranged and in harmonious contact with their truest selves. Although the structural replication of Alighieri's Commedia is a recurrent pattern in the domains of art, principally in literature, it continues to be a virtually unexplored, though not unharmed, reference in the field of digital creations. Dauntlessly, Stanislavski establishes a subtle yet absorbing parallel between the Italian epic and the facets of the dichotomous moral system embedded in his latest creation. If on the one hand the basis of morality and the stringency of decisions and their long-term results have been exerted in games of similar experimentalism, Suda's Michigan for instance, Datura adds magnitude to this ordinary dualist principle of Manichaeism. What roads in a Robert Frost poem, each leading to a discrete outcome. As the subject migrates from a disturbed waking state and into the realms of the subconscious, so does the scenery assume different contours. The soft sylvan grounds covered with amber-hued leaves, the lifeless remnants of naked deciduous trees. This emotional regression is further adorned with the inclusion of elusive personifications, all of which seem to revel in this strictly non-verbal setting. The hunter figure, later embodying the gatekeeper persona, the child, representing both innocence and insubordination, and the many wild creatures and volatile loci that bestow invigorating surrealist essence to this soul-searching passage. At the heart of this tale of two choices, however, lie the very fundaments of Christianity's oldest moral dilemma, as emblematized by the apple in the myth of Eden. Whereas the icon itself is present in one of the most significant chapters of this open-ended digital narrative, the essence from which the entire mirage derives from the presumed consumption of another forbidden fruit, that of the Datura. Known to have been used in ancient rites of passage in primitive societies, today's science identifies this plant as a potently venomous natural substance whose psychoactive effects inevitably translate into a vivid state of delirious indifference between the real and the elusive. The resulting hallucination induces a violent delirium in which reality is barely distinguishable from fantasy, as the toxicity of the fruit is known to excite that mental mechanism capable of conceiving intense and almost palpable visions. The presence of the right, or conversely, the moral challenge which is also attributed to the crossing of the forest in the eyes of olden wisdom, blends in rare perfection with the ultimate ambition of this deceptively chaotic journey, a maddening yet methodical transmigration. The decisive objective of this reverie, towards which all acts and choices appear to course, is to embrace the subject by exceeding its own virtual sphere, eventually raising the proverbial fourth wall. Features such as puzzles and mechanics are but minimalist constructions made to captivate a video game playing audience, and offer purposeful interactions whose greater meaning derives from their allegorical value, each intriguing element a valuable contribution to a potential realization of an ultimate rationale. Concurrently, Datura does not necessarily seek the identical rewards as those accumulated within common games, even the ones it sporadically alludes to. Perhaps such is the reason why it has been paired with Dear Esther, a title with whom it shares more dissimilarities than resemblances. Firstly, Stanislavski does not acknowledge the auspicious outcomes that may stem from tortuous soliloquy, nor does it consciously limit the interactive substance to its barest form for the sake of contradicting the grand industrial scheme. Moreover, his creation is equally capable of establishing a critical evaluation without the need for such drastic resolutions, therefore distancing itself from that taut and conceitedly dissenting model of Pinchbeck's indie sensation. And yeah, I agree, Dear Esther's fucking well pretentious. Datura's ambivalent ending procures a higher form of revelation, well beyond the high-tech hubris or the glad-handed yielding of the very same saccharine rewards otherwise coveted by game-playing masses. Rather, its ambiguity and humility are bound to be misconstrued by a perplexed and dissatisfied audience, whose formatted ability to reason and learn from the very games they choose to play is woefully deficient. Regardless, it stands as a late paradigm whose inspiring experimentalism was rarely witnessed during the so-called current generation of hardware. The undeniable confirmation that technology and production values are largely immaterial when stacked up against the authority of form and thematic content. New meanings and interpretations have emerged shortly after the completion of this article, further developing the notion already expounded in previous paragraphs, that any extensive understanding of Datura and its core symbolism relies solely on interpretative abilities, not the application of the logic commonly required to complete ordinary video games. While the implications of this theory are likely to be frowned upon at first, it is imperative to consider how such a parallel could only exist in these vague and uncertain terms, for, predictably, a less equivocal citation of the themes at hand would have endangered the integrity of project or even hindered its publication altogether. Entirely religious in its denotation, though numerological in architecture, this construal is based upon a series of outwardly irrelevant Roman numerals whose value is exposed after the completion of an episode or dilemma. Crucial to this broader realization is the initial figure appearing below the pediment of the middle gate whose doors lead to the concentric hedge maze. The numeral 12, linked to the ambulance preamble, conjures the dramatic climax of the Passion of Christ in the Sacred Way. A recurring motive in sacred art, the Stations of the Cross, consist of a serialized account of Christ's last moments on earth, divided and arranged after the interpretations of the Gospel according to Roman Catholic theology. Taking these numbered panels into account, be they descriptive or pictorial, this analogy becomes quintessential in the apprehension of a stimulating and unifying sense found at the very crux of Datura, carefully concealed beneath many a shroud of deception. Finding the underlying gist beneath each transcendence, well below the many visual and oral cloaks that dress them, is the single key to understand how the structure of this uncanny experience is by no means fortuitous, as has been hinted repeatedly. The following is a list detailing the congruence between Datura's 9 visions and the corresponding stock from the 14 segments that compose the Via Dolorosa, which, if you don't know, is actually the route in the old city of Jerusalem where Jesus was forced by the Roman soldiers on the way to his crucifixion. Bear in mind that for reasons concerning production details and schedules, Plastic's title does not reflect the entirety of their initial plan, which does account for a small portion of omitted chapters. Number 1. Jesus is condemned to death. The decision of whether or not to run over the pig crossing the road relates humorously to Pilate's reluctance of whether or not to sentence the self-proclaimed Son of God. The act of washing of the hands, meaning the Roman prefect's desire to free himself of any blame for this conviction, is brought up elsewhere in the form of a prize. Number 2. Jesus carries the cross. After climbing the backyard tree, conceivably the antithesis of the tree of life, the choice is offered to carry the wounded infant. This represents the sufferance of pulling a weight, akin to that of carrying the cross. Number 5. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus to carry the cross. Emerging from behind a closed door, a dog, if spared from harm, helps the protagonist fight off the hunter whose red-hued attire and fire-spitting weapon could be interpreted as an iconic transposition from the mythical dragon in the Book of Revelations. Number 6. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. This instance represents both the public mockery witnessed throughout the Via Crucis and the importance of the element of water in the Christian rite. In a regression to infancy, a child takes away a piece of clothing from the protagonist, running away from him while taunting him with scornful gestures. These may represent the cloth and water with which Veronica cleaned Jesus and offered him a fleeting moment of comfort. Number 8. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. From all the conventional 14 stops, the 8th is that which best embodies the concept of martyrdom. Halfway, Christ stops to comfort the women along the road, despite his own grievance. This unselfish act is inverted in Datura with the appearance of the first and only female figure, whose face is seen briefly from underneath the ice. The choice to shatter the ice and save the unknown woman comes invariably at the cost of self-sacrifice. Number 10. Actually, this is what we've just seen before. Jesus is stripped of his garments. After being shot down, a choice is offered to relieve the soldier by inspecting the wound on his body and removing his clothes. Number 11. The Crucification. The binding handcuffs are equivalent to the nails holding the arms against the wooden cross and the resulting grief. Number 12. Jesus dies on the cross. The subject dies whilst lying in an ambulance stretcher. Number 14. The Deposition. The tomb in which Christ is laid is represented by the endless fall into the well. The light at the end of a tunnel signals the passage to afterlife. This thesis is also supported by the fact that the majority of these episodes, accessed through forest exits, relate to the basic premise of saving those in need of aid, or the acts of salvation. Furthermore, the image of Christ on the cross may also be irreverently evoked by the prize doll figure whose arms are hanging by threads, to name a few examples. Perhaps more important than the symbols concealed within Datura, it is necessary to ponder the reasons why Stanislavski and his ensemble went to such lengths to make them nearly impossible to detect, and that which becomes particularly evident once this laborious process of secretion is laid bare. As startling as it may sound, the study of faith and religion remains a taboo which still affects the medium of games in a fiercely restrictive manner. A brief glance at precedents show how most every assumed adaptation of biblical narratives or themes comes in the naive form of educational software, conveying basic teachings mostly directed towards infantile audiences. Nevertheless, the exploration of Christian themes has always been marginal compared to the overabundance of games based on mythology and rites pertaining nearly all known civilizations from bygone eras. The reason behind this discrepancy is never debated, let alone admitted by those very entities whose attentive and often despotic control over contents has certainly blue-penciled a plethora of ideas, either prevented to be released to the public or dispossessed of their initial import. It would seem as if the definitive motive behind this intricate veiling of an acutely ecclesiastical subtext intends to defy this established order of thoughts and strike back at what could be considered a veneered form of censorship. In the end, and in accordance with the world of the arts, all forms of restriction imposed by hierarchies have long empowered and galvanized artists into becoming wiser in their search for cunning ways with which to disguise forbidden substances, making them conspicuous only to those like-minded observers whose keenness and passion enables them to apprehend what most others are condemned to overlook. My days, that was a mouthful. Serious bit of tier 3 vocabulary in that article. I know that probably went on for too long, but I really had to read it out because it really is an amazing encapsulation of what the game is actually going for, and so many people have misunderstood it, and it's amazing that someone actually went to the effort of connecting the dots, and they were actually acknowledged by the developers themselves. I mean, that's in stark contrast to other artists, say like David Lynch, who are extremely tight-lipped on their art and the meaning behind it. So it's cool that an actual player who obviously is extremely talented, linguistically speaking, was able to articulate in a way that it touched the developers so much that they actually had to shout them out and say, yep, you got it. And yeah, it does seem to be an allegory for Jesus's experience walking to his crucifixion, and also a slight hint towards the mystical aspects and experiences that are held within substances and plants like Datura. It's amazing that this game conveys that in such a subtle manner, yet people can still pick up on it if they're smart and conscious enough and analyse it in a thoughtful, intricate way. So we're actually at the end of the game here now, and yeah, this is probably the game at its most surreal, dreamlike and trippy. So many weird and idiosyncratic sequences, and this is probably the best of them all. As you can see here, you actually rub the mirror and it reveals your PS3 player icon. Tough Guy Gaming YouTube. Yes, man, you have absolutely smashed it. My guy's getting all the trophies tonight. Such a neat little thing here. It reminds you that you, the player, are absolutely central to the experience of a game. No matter how much you get lost in its world, the player is the one who's facilitating every single action inside it. Pretty cool, to be honest. And with that comes the end of the game. I hope you've enjoyed watching this and that I've not rambled on too much. Mate, honestly, if you made it to the end of this video, you deserve a fucking gold medal, because I could not be doing that. And yeah, we, the player character, are on our way to crucify ourselves, if that article's anything to go by. Yeah, I hope you learnt some cool things from this video. I liked sharing all this information about an obscure game, and I think it's good for gaming in general to highlight out there and intriguing titles that people would be interested in if they were brought to their attention, and these are the sort of games that should be. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll definitely be tackling another game in the future. I'll probably just go straight into LSD Dream Emulator, because that is the psychedelic game, as I have heard. And yeah, I'll try and actually record that this time. I'm sure I will be able to. I mean, it's only a PS1 game. Hopefully my bitter hardware can hack recording and playing it at the same time, because I refuse to record it if it's in sub 30 FPS. That is just not. We're past the fucking days of 30 FPS now. The future is here. Yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. I would go out and say support Plastic Studios and buy Datura, but unfortunately you cannot even do that. So if you're out there listening, Mr. Plastic Studio himself, get Datura reloaded on the market and we'll be snapping it up within microseconds. Peace out, guys.